All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jobs and Business Development Committee meeting for Wednesday, November 23rd, 2011. Councilmember Parks has called in sick, and I do think we are expecting Mr. Labange, but I want to make sure that we start the meeting and get through everything that we can this morning. Thank you to everybody who's taken time out of your day to be here for these motions that are before us and our items. Do we have any general public comment? Okay, so we'll close our general public comment. Let's go then to our first item in the regular meeting.
Item number one is a motion by Council Members Englander, Garcetti, and Corretz relative to the request for the City Attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to eliminate the gross receipt tax for new car dealership in the city.
And to be clear, just for folks that are listening, that means any dealerships that sell new cars, not just new dealerships that come in, I think. All right. Let's go ahead and, if we can, I'll just say a couple things about this, and then we have some public comment cards as well. I think we know that for a long time, surrounding cities have used our broken tax system here in the city of Los Angeles to lure businesses away from us. And hopefully we're here to say today that stops. Los Angeles is going to compete for jobs and business. We're going to do everything that we can to ensure that we have an environment that attracts as many businesses that in turn help us all generate revenue for the services that we provide. We today have before us a motion that myself and Councilmember Englander put forward. The statistics speak for themselves. I think we've lost 95 car dealerships in the city of Los Angeles over the last 20 years. And, that's millions of dollars that we could have used from sales tax receipts to fill potholes, to build fire stations, jobs that we could have had, et cetera. And we, in the last meeting of this committee, discussed a report on eliminating our gross receipts tax altogether, which I think should still be our goal in the city. But one of the suggestions that was made that we pulled out of that was to look at some shorter-term fixes that could be done in specific areas as we move towards that goal. And one today is to make sure that we present an ordinance to eliminate the gross receipts tax for the new car dealerships. So we have that motion before us. I want to invite a couple of folks to come forward. Daryl Holter is our first speaker from Downtown LA Auto Group. And then we have Michael Gagan, who wears many hats in these chambers, but today is here representing Greater LA new car dealers. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Council Member. My name is Daryl Holter. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Downtown LA Auto Group, a family business that owns and operates 6 new car franchises here in downtown LA on Figueroa and 1 store in Carson. I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of the Greater LA New Car Dealers Association, and I'm this year's Vice President of the California New Car Dealers Association. He's not here today, but I'd like to thank Councilmember Parks for helping us 5 years ago with an ordinance that made it easier for us to get through the land use maze in LA, and that was an obstacle, but the one that we're talking today is another obstacle, and I think it would be really a good thing for the dealers and for the city. The passage of this ordinance to eliminate the gross tax receipts will most assuredly result in additional dealerships as well as the expansion of the dealerships that are already here. Some of our members met with the mayor last week at the auto show and discussed this, and several of them had dealerships right on the edge of the city that they were thinking about moving back into the city, and this can help. Of course, we're sensitive to the fact that the city has to assure itself that there will be no loss in revenue, but I think we can make the case. In 2010 and 11, the new car dealerships in LA had $2.9 billion in sales and generated $29 million in sales tax revenue, $3.6 million in gross receipts tax revenue to the city. In order to make up that loss, we would have to generate an additional $360 million in sales. Well, I think we can do that. Auto sales in California are trending 9.4% higher this year than last. And if that holds through June, the new car dealers in the city will generate an additional $273 million in sales, which will translate into $2.7 million in additional sales tax. Or take a look at Beverly Hills BMW, which relocated into the city. If that generates $140 million in sales, it will produce $1.4 million in sales tax. Or take our own group, which is the one I know the most about. We built 3 new stores, Porsche, Volkswagen, and Audi, in 1926. And if you look at what we generated in sales tax in 2005, it was $13.6 million. This year it will be $19.2 million. That translates into $2.19 million in sales tax revenue. So there are other factors as well. The new Motor Village Chrysler store, the Honda store has new leadership. And so, basically the business tax is one of the things that is an irritant, and it's one of the things that will help us to stay in business, and it will help us to bring more automobile dealers into the city. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks for those statistics. Appreciate that. And I think we'd calculated that if we just got 5 or 6 new dealerships to come back into LA, it would more than cover the cost just from sales tax. So.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Michael Gagan and Charlie Gill.
Mr. Chairman, we were just here to answer questions if there were any.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm well familiar with this, having been the co-author, so I will go ahead and amend the motion to instruct the CAO and Office of Finance to report on the fiscal impact also, which is something I know Councilmember Parks wanted to know, of the elimination of the gross receipts tax for new car dealerships, and like to transmit this motion to Council so we can begin the work with the City Attorney in drafting the ordinance. And obviously that will be done unanimously. So thank you. We'll go next to our special meeting items. Item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is a motion, Garcetti Rosendahl, relative to the Department of Transportation to reviewing its parking enforcement of operations and film zones.
Thank you. Just as a way of framing the remaining items that we have here in the next remainder of the hour, we have 4 different items, kind of a film day here in committee. This is, I think, only our second meeting of the committee, but we wanted to jump out of the gates quickly with continuing momentum and agenda to make Los Angeles as film-friendly a city as we can. And there's been some great work that's been done that we've been working on the last few years, but I'm very excited to chair this committee and to keep that momentum, that regular communication with the industry and Film LA and others to be able to make sure that we continue that work forward. And pleased to have convened that first meeting and something that we'll do regularly. The film breakfast that I hosted on November 10th, I think it was, we got very useful and concrete suggestions from the filming community on how to help filming here in Los Angeles. And so after the breakfast, I introduced these 4 motions, co-introduced with other colleagues of mine in addressing the issues that we're here to discuss here today. I think we know that California, particularly LA, is the most significant cultural production center in the world. And to the world, we are Hollywood. And while no other location on earth, past or present, can match Hollywood's global cultural influence, we are in a competitive environment and very aware of that. So as we look at the dramatic loss that we've seen of business to other countries and states, a region hosting only 40%, for instance, of domestic film production, and many of those are the smaller films and not the blockbuster ones. According to the Milken Institute, I think we all know that report, if we had worked to keep film production at its earlier level, 36,000 jobs would be here right now in California that are not, generating $2.4 billion in wages. When people say we can't afford to do some of these things, we know that we can't afford not to do. So we have been working to encouraging filming in LA. We've made progress in installing electric nodes for filmings, free parking, free use of city buildings, to reduce our tax benefits to help some of the creative professionals who produce things in the creative industry, and to streamline film permit approval processes. We've also worked to reduce the minimum revenue threshold for production in Los Angeles to $5 million and the maximum to $12 million. So what this means is when you have production costs that are $5 million or below, you only pay $145 in local taxes. And the most that you would pay in a year is $9,100. This saved production companies in Los Angeles last year, we estimate, about $3 million. And I worked with many of you in the audience to introduce an entertainment talent exemption that saved kind of creative artists over $700,000 in 2010. And thank you to Film LA, who I know is here, and for the launching of the award-winning public service announcements and campaign to look at the spillover effect of how filming works here in Los Angeles, the flower shops, catering companies, and the other businesses. I'm proud of these efforts, but they're not enough, which is why we're here today. So our first item, as we just heard, is relative to the Department of Transportation reviewing its parking enforcement operations in film zones. And why don't we hear actually first from the public comment. We actually have one card on this. Mike, if you'd like to come forward. Mike Fantasia is here from Location Managers Guild of America to say a few words on this. Good morning.
Good morning. Councilman Garcetti, thank you very much for your continued
Absolutely.
support of the business.
You bet.
I recently filmed The Amazing Spider-Man here in Los Angeles, and we did go to New York City for about 4 weeks of plate shots and big wide shots. They have a similar problem in New York City, and from experience, my personal experience there, it was awful. Many vehicles, cranes, condors, extras vehicles, the transportation coordinator's personal vehicle, which is his roving office, they were all ticketed, in some cases towed, because the DOT there implemented a very similar policy. DOT here in LA has made some great strides over the last couple of years, but they've still got a long way to go. There's no issues that we need to deal with them. I just want to go on record as saying that we need to do whatever we can do to help the folks at DOT realize the importance of these different vehicles that we have, and know that the ticketing and possibly towing of those vehicles is just a huge detriment.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very
That's all I have
much.
to say. Thank you.
I appreciate it, and hang tight. I know you have a card in for another item as well. Department of Transportation here yet this morning? Can you come on forward? Thank you. And CLA, feel free to join us at the table if you want for anything too. Come on all the way through. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about what current policy is in Department of Transportation, and how you do your training, because we know oftentimes there's policies that we implement, and if it doesn't get down to every single person in an agency or a department, that's sometimes where misunderstandings occur. But walk us through the interaction you've had with the industry, what sort of policies you have, and what we could do, you think, to continue moving in a positive path towards what the speaker mentioned.
Sure. From my
And
understanding...
if you'll just identify yourself for the record.
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
thanks.
Devin Farfan, Captain of Hollywood Parking Enforcement.
Thank you.
And basically, we've had some issues with particularly Film LA, and I believe it had to do with a policy change that we had made regarding after hours and the mileage placards. And recently, we we've trained our personnel to identify the type of placards they have issued Film LA with a official contractor vehicle, which would put them in a 24-hour window where they would be exempt, whatever the mileage placards should be exempt.
Because right now they're just made for the day. Is that why?
Well, currently during the business hours, our placards are enforceable, meaning they have exemptions. But after 7 p.m., you would most of them go out of effect. So, contractor vehicles we've identified as being contractor vehicle placards are 24-hour placards, and that's what we have issued Film LA. And so that would give them that 24-hour window versus that business hour window. So that correction, we sent out something November 17th to all our command staff to let sure that all our personnel is trained on that and of that change. Currently in the film, they usually will buy a permit for the street. If they close the street, we do not go in unless we're called in by whoever bought the permit, and we'll tow and cite any vehicles at their request, but we don't arbitrarily go in there. However, if the street is not closed, they could be subject to red zone violations for safety purposes. So usually it depends on whether or not the street is closed or whether it's open, on how we would enforce safety regulations. So I guess basically there has to be an understanding of when the street's closed, what they can do, and when the street's opened, what they can do with a permit.
So are there two types of permits out there right now, those that cover overnight and those that don't, or are we moving all of them to include a full 24-hour?
When they are filming and they buy a permit to basically park their vehicles on the street, they buy a temporary towaway through our signposting division, and they will allow them parking spots that they have requested. And we don't enforce. Basically, we leave them alone. That's our practice.
But the placards that you were mentioning?
Now, that would be, my understanding is
contract
they
vehicles?
have times when they send folks out that put out flyers, and they park at meters, and I believe those are the isolated incidents that I was hearing of from other folks. I haven't had independent request, but through my own division, I know the phone calls that I've got have been when we're out placing flyers at businesses, letting them know they were coming. They had been cited, and the particulars were that they were cited and they thought that their placard was visible, but yet this policy that we had, I think, fell into that window. So hopefully that will clear up a lot of that, and our parking support bureau that handles the cancellation of these types of citations is supposed to be working closely with them to make sure that they take care of anything as far as the red tape is getting these tickets canceled in a timely manner.
Have there been issues in preferential parking districts?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, that was one of the things that we look at. But what we'll do is we'll work closely with folks from the industry and try to get some of both the anecdotal evidence, of individual cases, as well as some of the recurring problems, and like to make sure that you are there at CLA as well, so that DOT can. Are you going to be the point person for all of DOT on this issue then? Or?
I believe I am. I understand there's a meeting in a couple of weeks to address particular issues, so that we can make sure that our staff is trained and that we can alleviate most of these problems that they're running into.
Well, we'll help convene that, make sure that everybody's there, and we can throw the whole kitchen sink in of any problems we've ever had and try to address those and make sure that we have that training, that policy, and the procedures to accommodate that. Mr. CLA, did you want to?
John Wickham with the CLA's office. Through the citywide film task force that your council created, and through other conversations that the city staff have held with location managers, we've encountered a number of examples of issues that have come up with parking enforcement, and it's funny because it goes in two directions. There are a lot of concerns about ticketing vehicles that are improperly permitted areas, and trying to address that. Actually, we had a police officer report that they had received a ticket in their black and white in one of these situations. And then on the flip side, there are areas that are designated as no parking zones for the public, so that a film shoot can occur, and sometimes a car will be present in that area, and the film company will call to have that addressed. It both requires a ticket and then towing, and there's been various degrees of response in those scenarios where the film industry has had to wait many hours for a response from the city to deal with the towing required. And so it's there's a lot of judgment, I think, that's required from the parking enforcement officers on the street, and I think as you've raised the issue of training to make sure that people really have a good understanding of how to interpret the situation and address it in an appropriate way.
All right, great. How long do you think we need for producing report back? Should we meeting in 2 weeks? Is that right?
I understand. Well, the CAO is actually on this team as well, and the CAO is working to schedule that meeting. And I believe in a week and a half, we have a date.
All right. Well, why don't we look at the first meeting back in the new year then to hear the situation and what we're going to do to address it. Okay.
Great.
All right. We'll move the motion forward. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, please.
Item number 3 is a motion, Garcetti Rosendahl, relative to the status of a citywide film task force and opportunities related to filming at various locations in order to encourage filming in Los Angeles.
All right. So this motion is not only to ask the CAO and CLA to report on the status of the citywide task force, but also to invite the county and other agencies to participate as we see issues that come up that aren't just city-specific or in our own bailiwick. We want to make sure, for instance, coordinate with the county in filming on the beaches, some of the county health policies that have related recently to craft services that have made, that I think for the average person sound kind of a little bit extreme, like wrapping every individual fork. And we visited some sets to see what the impact has been for productions on that. But to allow that, we would have really one team here. I think Film LA works across jurisdictions and wherever we can in the city as well. We want to try to do that as well. But the CLA, any thoughts or anything you want to add to that? I think we wanted to just get a general update, but also to work a couple specific issues into those meetings. The beaches and the catering were two of them.
Yes, absolutely. I know there were a lot of questions about the catering issues and the health inspection issues, and being able to create a forum where those conversations can be held before a policy is passed would be far more helpful than having a policy pass and then everybody try and catch up on the back end.
Absolutely.
We had, again, in these conversations that we've had with the film industry, there was an example a couple years ago of a production that was occurring out at Venice Beach where the county lifeguards had to have an inspector on site, the county beaches and harbor had to have an inspector on site, Recreation and Parks had an inspector on site, Film LA had inspectors. At the end of the day, I think there were something like 9 different city and county and other agency monitors on site, all of which racks up costs for the production. And there should be ways that through cooperative efforts, we can find ways to ensure the protection of the location, of the public, and of the staff without having all of those additional costs on the production.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And, part of what I want to do in the committee, too, is open up the space. The task force can meet about it, but I also want to open up the public space to discuss these things. I mean, I think when the public hears, for instance, that county health inspectors have decided to go overnight to a system in which it used to be for craft services, you can have a tray full of food that everybody serves themselves from, which would be a reasonable thing to do any workplace. Suddenly they're being treated as a restaurant, and every portion has to be individually wrapped, and every, think just of the environmental waste that we're creating from that. I've reached out to Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, who wants to help take the lead at the county level on this, and we really appreciate that partnership of Supervisor Ridley Thomas's office. But any person, when they're wondering why is it that production is leaving, why are we seen as business unfriendly, suddenly just needs to visit the set and see how difficult it is to eat a meal. I mean, the most basic of things. And those changes, again, while maybe somebody was well-intentioned, it's different than being a caterer or being a food truck. These are folks that are on the set all the time, doing it the way I've been lucky enough to eat from some of those places, and let me tell you, it's good eating. So the last thing we want to do is chase them away. So we'll move this forward and ask CAO and CLA report kind of more comprehensively on the status. Speaking of chefs, welcome. I was just talking about catering in our film industry, and you guys all walked in. It was good timing. But welcome to City Council chambers. We will absolutely be looking forward to resolving those issues, doing that here where appropriate, but if we can do it behind the scenes and get stuff done too, we'll just announce that in here. So we'll go ahead and move that forward. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item number 4 is a motion, Garcetti-Krikorian, relative to evaluating staffing requirements related to film permitting services and field responses to film-related issues and options to enhance services and producing informational material related to facts about disruptions to permitted film productions for distribution.
Absolutely. This is a recurrent problem, but let's hear from Mike again. I like it when someone from the industry describes it more than me, so tell me what's happening out there and what we can do.
One of the problems that we have when filming in commercial districts, downtown especially, residents, business owners are sometimes upset with our parking and our activities. And there are many times that they will not sign off on the approvals that we need to get a permit unless we give them a large sum of money. And there are many times when I've had to call on our folks, our friendly folks at LAPD to come down and intervene and have discussions with these folks. Most of the time it works out pretty amicably. It's very expensive to shoot in Los Angeles. Very, very expensive. Actually, a friend of mine who's a location manager, she hasn't worked in LA in about 7 years. She just recently, in the last month or so, took over a show in LA, one of the few big features filming here. She called me up and said, Mike, it costs ridiculous amounts of money to film here. She listed Mike, this can't be right, this can't be right. And she was going down her budget. And I said, that's what you have to budget. And one of the biggest line items in her budget were payoffs to commercial businesses for impact. Now, I think most of us want to pay our freight, but when you offer somebody a couple of $1,000 in exchange for some of the electronics that they sell or shoes that they sell or clothing that they sell, and they say, no, we don't want that, we just want cash, we don't want to give you anything for that money. One of the things I like to do, especially downtown, is to basically reimburse folks for their business loss and then take those goods and give them to missions, food banks, things like that, which is a win-win for everybody. So I think that anything we can do to make sure that we've got enough folks in the film unit at LAPD so that they can come down and help us solve these problems would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And just to be clear for folks that disrupting activities that have been properly already permitted is a violation of city law. And I know that you oftentimes find experience where it's already permitted, it's been signed off, and then people say, hey, I'm going to make this very difficult without my payoff. And we will, if that happens, or when we know that that's happening, that is something that we want to enforce, and we appreciate.
And there are times, if I may, when you get this person's signature, you pay them an amount of money, and then, in a week before you film, then you show up to film, and they've got the music on, they're standing in front of the camera truck, things like that.
Absolutely. Well,
thank you very much.
You bet. We have a LAPD representative here, correct? Or representatives. Why don't you come on forward? We hear a little bit more about some of what you've seen out there in the field. Good morning, Captain.
Good morning, sir. Captain McDonald with currently now Emergency Services Division. I just left Emergency Operation Divisions where Contract Services Section is housed. With me today is Lieutenant Ray Garvin, who has been working in Contract Services for a number of years here. Many of the issues that you reference or that are referenced here are not new to us. We have been increasing our efforts to address these issues over a period of time here. Unfortunately, as a result of staffing issues over at the department, as you're well aware, we have a number of vacancies in that unit currently right now that are not helping us in addressing on-site inspections of these particular sites. However, when we receive complaints of these issues, then we deploy officers and they go, and as was discussed, that we typically have a very high success rate of mitigating the problem, if we will.
Addressing it.
Addressing the problem.
Is it complaint-driven, mostly, then, because of those vacancies? I mean, are you able to respond to every complaint right now in terms of staffing levels?
I'm going to give it to Lieutenant Garvin. I can speak to that, but he's a better source.
Right. Good morning, Lieutenant.
Hi, sir. Most of our stuff is complaint-driven. To be frank, our operation is usually Monday through Friday, around 5 or 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Those are the usual hours. Presently, the field side of operations, the stuff that, the personnel that respond out to filming locations, whether at the request of the location manager, a citizen, Film LA, or whatever. Right now, that's presently one sergeant and one police officer available to do that. We had another police officer that just recently transferred to another assignment, so her vacancy is there.
How many vacancies do you have right now?
In the entire unit?
You have 4 police officer vacancies currently.
And how many people are in it? Non-vacancies? That's 4 out of how many positions?
Basically, it would be a total of 6.
Okay,
Sergeant
so
and
there's
5.
2 people there.
And there's 2 people here at this point.
We have other employees that are involved in filming. We also, by statute, are like the final authority on all film permits. So we look at every film permit. And you're talking 7,000 film permits a year, 20,000 plus permitted filming locations. Film LA is great because they have the online ops system that really helps us facilitate it, but that is very labor intensive. That is, so we do that work, and we also do our First Amendment permits within my section, and we also facilitate all the Bureau of Street Service special event permits on behalf of our department. So we have a permit unit which has folks that that do look at film permits as part of the job, but they have other duties too. So it'd be a portion of those, but right now, for what the location managers see, they see, 1 sergeant and 1 police officer presently doing that job.
Okay. And if you get complaints from other time periods, I mean, is it such that you need to be out there and resolve it right away, or are you able to go, if you get a complaint on a Saturday or Sunday, to go on Monday and try to deal with it?
It depends on the type of complaint. Obviously, we tell everybody, excuse me, if it's an emergency, dial 911. Don't try to reach us through Film LA if it's an emergency. Most of the stuff that you see is what Mike was talking about previously with the interference with properly permitted filming. That's an issue. The bigger issue, though, is unpermitted filming. The majority of our responses deal with complaints of unpermitted filming. So those are the two main issues. If we get a call, well, subject to our ability to answer the phone, because there are overtime issues, there are budgetary concerns, in these fiscal times. So if Film LA can reach us, we will in turn call the watch commander who's on duty, ask them to send somebody out, but then it's a whole process of having to educate the person who goes out there on the process. So we have been able to do that, probably not to the complete, 100% satisfaction of the industry or Film LA or whatnot, but we do great work. They love what we do, but we do what we can.
Is it mostly in a couple divisions, or is it throughout the city? I mean, in other words, would it be useful to do training once a year in 2 or 3 divisions that have the majority of filming, so that if it is on off hours, that people would have that expertise?
We do training. All the senior lead officers citywide have a senior lead officer school that we are a presenter at. They did 2 schools last year, and we did presentations on filming. We revamped our filming. It was really well received. It was great because we had some folks in Pacific area there, and there was always problems on the boardwalk there. We also have done outreach to Central area, which it's usually primarily the downtown area has problems, and then the Venice Beach, which seem to be the big impactful. But as far as that's for interference and just everyday problems, but the unpermitted filming issue, that's a citywide issue.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate both of you being here. What I'll ask the CLA to do, and I don't know if is Film LA. I mean, if you want to come up and talk about it, or if you want to answer questions, I'll leave it up to you. But one of the things that we looked at in the motion was working with Film LA to produce a flyer and other informational materials that productions could distribute related to facts about disruptions to permitted film production. But we also will ask, as it says in this motion, the police department to evaluate staffing requirements. So as we're looking at our budget, just one last thing for the PD. It's helpful to know those vacancies. If the CLA will work together with PD, just to find out what those vacancies are, what staffing up would mean, and what sort of capacity that would build. As we're looking at this coming year's budget, we'll take that into account as well. So our CLA right there is a man to talk to offline. Let him know. Thank you. Appreciate it. And that or any other suggestions? Are you guys willing to put something together that we can then distribute to city departments and work with the industry itself?
Sure. Paul Audley, President of Film LA. Councilmember Garcetti, we're very happy to do that and to work on it and to use both electronic and print means. And certainly through our distributions when we're out doing filming, it's an easy way to do it. I do want to affirm the extraordinary value of the contract services section and the work that they're doing and the change it has made in filming in California in just the short time that we've had field units out there. We have heard from the industry a great deal of change in the ability of people to do some of the demand of funds that Mike Fantasia was talking about, that with this unit's availability to go out and stop it, word has gotten out. We also hear constantly about the need for more, especially on the issues of unpermitted filming, because it's a small crew. It's very hard to get them out on routine checks, whether film crews are out there with permits or not. And so we do support their presence, and we would support their expansion if budget and personnel allowed to have that happen. With between 80 and 250 permitted film crews out a day in the city, you can see that it'd be very hard to get around to those. And I also want to thank LAPD for beginning a program of taking our permit coordinators out on the field with them to experience what it is out there, the kinds of things they run into as our people work those permits.
And if they find unpermitted, I mean, is there any cost recovery if they find unpermitted filming? Is there a fine or violation? Does anybody know?
It's a misdemeanor charge.
Misdemeanor.
Also, yeah.
Is there any money attached to that, Lieutenant? I'm just thinking of how we fund it. If folks are filming unpermitted, what is the penalty?
It's currently a misdemeanor. Last year we did 18 criminal cases. This year we're at about, 7 or so. We're down. The vast majority of those result in a city attorney hearing. and a very small fine. We have had some success in getting some reimbursement for the response of police officers to a set. We just had a case, I believe it was the blackout case, which is a film production in the Valley that caused a response of officers. And at the city attorney hearing, it was the final disposition of that was that the location of the production had to remit to the city $2,500 for the cost for the police response out there. That happens occasionally. That's not the usual case. But right now, mostly everything is a city attorney hearing.
If it was administrative code, if you could do it as kind of ACE violation, would that, like a ticket more than a misdemeanor, would that be helpful? Would that produce more revenue? Help pay for more people?
You're getting into policy here, but from my field level, I would say anything. I think you want to go in the opposite direction. You want to make it so if you're not filming with the permit, there are something happens to you if you get caught, as opposed to if it's just a ticket and a fine attached to a ticket.
Becomes a cost of doing business. Yeah.
Well, it becomes a cost of doing business, and I don't know that would necessarily deter it from my perspective. So,
okay, appreciate it. Paul, do you want to add anything else? Okay, Tom.
Yeah, just how many illegal film shoots did you come across in the last 5 years?
We haven't tracked it for 5 years. I've only had the unit since its inception, probably in 2008 or so. I'd have to look at those numbers. Not every time we come across someone without a permit doesn't mean that we do a criminal complaint against them. We're pretty picky about it's got to be pretty egregious. Because sometimes you'll have a student film out there and they just didn't know, or the person had the wrong thing. So we do the vast majority, warnings. We refer them to Film LA, they get the permit fixed. We reserve the enforcement to those rare cases of
so
folks.
Maybe 3 to 5. 3 to 5 cases. Maybe, I mean, a low number. It's not 50 cases, it's not 100 cases.
Of unpermitted over the last 5 years?
Oh, no, yeah.
Oh, no, there's many. I won't say many, but that we are able to.
But a big production, none with big semis.
No. Most of that stuff is smaller productions that do that.
Right.
Yeah. It's not your major motion pictures from our perspective. It's mostly smaller independents and things of that nature that we come across. I mean, you get a mix, but I can't tell you how many there are because there's many that we don't come across because.
I got it. I think they got a permit. No one complains. I understand. I think you're right there, Eric. If we make it as a cost of doing business, it becomes something they do. But I think it's up. We should, for safety of those working, those in the neighborhood, and liability to the city, because if anything happens on those locations, well, was it a legal filming operation? That's usually the.
And to preserve neighborhoods, council member, that these films that don't have permits tend to be less responsible about how they treat a neighborhood, which makes it more difficult for permitted filming to work.
How many complaints you get a month about filming?
Filming in general or unpermitted?
Filming in general.
We probably get somewhere between 75 and 80 complaints from all the things going on, and typically they're more about parking or noise than they are about other things.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, great. We'll go ahead and we'll move Mr. Sealy, please.
Would you like a report from CEO CLA, maybe city attorney, on the fine structure for these unpermitted productions? Or
you could probably just brief us on it, like separately. I don't think we need a formal report. Just if you find out information, let our staffs know. I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll move the motion forward then, and we'll attach Mr. Laban to the other motions and take up item 5.
You betcha.
Item number 5.
Item number 5 is a motion Garcetti Labange relative to a pricing structure for film power nodes that have been installed at the old zoo, the Department of Water and Power's John Ferraro building, and City Hall.
Great, thank you. One of the things that worked on a couple years back, hearing from the industry, was the idea of these power nodes, which would eliminate the need for having expensive and polluting and noisy and expensive to productions generators on site, but to actually look at places that are where there's common filming on the street or in particular locations, help DWP get some new customers and help us have a safer, cleaner, cheaper way of powering those productions. So it's been great to see those up. We wanted to hear a little bit from the department about pricing structure, to have some sort of simple, efficient approach to provide power at reasonable, affordable rates. I know that if we can pull this off here, I think this is going to be a good thing for expanding DWP business and also a model of where we can build on those and look at other locations as well. So with that, Winnie.
By way of general background, this building has 2 film nodes. The JFB.
This building, City Hall, you mean?
This building, City Hall, has 2 film nodes. The general office building of DWP has 2 film nodes. And
what's the name of the general office building?
I'm sorry, it's the John Ferraro building.
Very good, thank you very
much. We have 2 film nodes there as well as 1 at Griffith Park. We have done some rate analysis for those 3 nodes, and based on 50% of loading, it's a daily analysis. We have not actually published to the film industry what those numbers are, but we're looking at, for example, for the John Ferraro building, a range of 200 to 250 per day. For this particular building, 300 to over $350 per day. Griffith Park is the difference between those 2 facilities and Griffith Park mainly is there's no meter. And so basically the upline would be whomever is responsible for the energy in that building. So we need to work with General Services Department and as well as perhaps Rec and Parks or someone so that we can bill accordingly. We'd also like to meet with Film LA because they would actually help us to collect the fees and disperse them to their proper owner. We also need to come up with almost an hourly rate, if you will, for Griffith Park, because right now it's heavily utilized by smaller entities such as Shakespeare in the Park and the Hollywood Haunted Hayride. So we need to actually even come up with a hourly rate, if you will, for those particular entities to use it. But that's where we are now, and we are looking to meet with General Services, Film LA, CAO, to come up with a plan that we could actually publish and so that everyone can know what the pricing is.
Okay. How much time do you need to do that, do you think?
Oh, we will be back in 30 days.
Okay,
we can definitely
great.
do it in 30 days.
Okay. Well, look,
I think I should give them 45 because the holiday break, and get Rec and Parks in there.
I never want to give a department the same one amount even more. If they can bring back in 30.
All right, I'm just saying.
We can get it done.
Okay.
Although it's true, in 30 days we won't be here.
Right.
Good point. All right. Well, let's see if we can. Actually, in 30 days, are we on recess already? We'll look at the calendar. I think if we can get it before, we'll try to do it and move things along. But if need be, we'll schedule it in the first meeting of the new year.
Yeah, it's good.
The first meeting.
Do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll meet with Rec and Parks. They have a commission, which in the charter gives them different regulations as opposed to a general city charter department.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Meet with Rec and Parks as well. You didn't list Rec and Parks. You said General Services, CAO. Have Rec and Parks in on the meeting.
Exactly.
You know. And what about the airport and the harbor, as long as we're talking about, do they film? They film probably a lot of the harbor.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we want to look at is step 2 is let's start getting a list. And if you have suggestions, give it to CLA. And we'd like to work with Film LA and industry leaders where other places are that we should be. I think we might have put some of that together in the past, but let's start looking at, we have these first 3. Let's try to knock them out, and then let's look at what a plan would be for this coming year to build out other ones. Okay?
Great.
So it's a win-win-win.
Good.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll move the motion forward.
And move it forward. Can I ask one question of the Film LA representative? I'm sorry, I had this at 9:30 instead of. It's all good. Did they tell you? No. It's all right. Yeah, I apologize. Okay, good. Just one quick thing. With the first of the year coming, could I just ask you to put a statistical bulletin out about filming and how important it is, and also make sure it goes to all the 95 neighborhood councils and other entities, city departments, etc., council, mayor's office. Just a 1 or 2 page bulletin that there were how many permits to this point in the year? How many film permits do you think you've issued this year? 20,000?
No, but there'll be that many locations.
That many
So,
locations.
yeah.
So you figure out statistically, and what I meant job-wise, which is so
Sure.
important, and so the importance, and then that you have a hotline if there's any problems.
Sure, we can actually do that through the
Thanks.
FilmWorks campaign
Yeah,
very
good.
effectively.
Film works. Good job.
Great, great.
All right.
We'll push
Thank
that
you.
out. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Jobs Business Development Committee. Thank you all to members of the industry, to others that were here, and thank you to our city staff, as always, for your good help, and we'll move these forward. And the city council meeting will begin in about 10 minutes. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.